wants to be happy, but not everyone knows how to be happy or even what happiness is. Join us today as we discuss the nature and the pursuit of real happiness with our special guest, Father Robert Spitzer, S.J., founder of the Magis Institute and the author of the book, Finding True Happiness, Satisfying Our Restless Hearts. I'm Michael Hernon, Vice President of Advancement at Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio, and you're watching Franciscan University Presents. Stay with us. Welcome to Franciscan University Presents. I'm Michael Hernon, Vice President of Advancement here at Franciscan University and your host for the Franciscan University Presents. I'm joined here in our studios by our regular panelists, Dr. Regis Martin, Professor of Systematic Theology, and Dr. Scott Hahn, who holds the Father Michael Scanlon Chair in Biblical Theology and the New Evangelization, again here at Franciscan University. And we're so pleased to welcome to Steubenville and to Franciscan University Presents Father Robert Spitzer, a Jesuit priest, formerly the President of Gonzaga University for about 11 years. You are the founder of the Magis Institute, which I am a big fan of, which educates the public on the relationship between physics, philosophy, reason, and faith. You are also the Chief Educating Officer of the Ethics and Performance Institute, the President of the Spitzer Center for Ethical Leadership. The list could go on. You've got probably about 10 different books that you've authored, but your latest is Finding True Happiness, Satisfying Our Restless Hearts. So, Father, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
Yeah, it is so good to have you here in Steubenville and our program today. The title of your book is really great. But how do you define happiness? What does that mean? Is it the same way that the secular world defines it?
in 1/2 minute.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, I might start off by giving a little bit of a prescient phrase from Aristotle at the beginning of the Nicomachean Ethics. And he says there, I'm paraphrasing now, happiness is the one thing you can will in and for itself, choose in and for itself. Everything else is chosen for the sake of happiness. Well, that just tells you where the stakes are. This one word for Aristotle is controlling what we think about success, what we think about the family we will have in the future, or the colleagues we will meet, the career we will pursue. But more than that, it's going to form the way we look at ideals or principles or values. It's also going to look at the way that we look at religion. It's going to look at the way we look at ourselves, whether we're going to consider ourselves a clump of atoms or molecules, whether we're going to consider ourselves a transcendent being that's pursuing something of high-minded purpose and eternal dignity with God. So, this one word, Aristotle said, if you can get a hold of this early on in the lives of young people, you're very likely to change their life, and you're likely to give them freedom. And this is the idea, is to give them a freedom to pursue a destiny where they have a clear idea of what's called the telos, their end, their objective of their lives. And of course, you might know that Aristotle was one of these teleological philosophers. He's always pointing toward an end or a final cause. And he saw happiness. That was the end of all ends. That was the telos not only of the ethical life, but of life itself. So getting back to your question, what about the definition of happiness? And there, of course, are 4 major definitions of happiness, which are quite different from one another, has sort of been elucidated throughout the centuries. I mean, one definition is, you probably discover it in Jeremy Bentham and some of those wonderful utilitarians. Happiness is like increasing my number of pleasure impulses per second. Right. So he's basically almost a hedonist, right? He's a person who's very, very pleasure-based.
Yes.
And he identifies happiness with some kind of extrinsic physical stimulus that comes to me. Bob Spitzer sees the bowl of linguine, smells the extra garlic, lunges toward it, and wolfs it down.
You're making us hungry.
Exactly. Stop. But that's
right.
So we call it level 1 happiness because it's the least pervasive, enduring, and deep.
Sure.
Although it's very intense, immediately gratifying.
I still like linguine. So.
And I love linguine, and there's nothing wrong with linguine. The question ultimately gets down to what's going to be your dominant view of happiness. So people can still like linguine. You just don't want to define your life in terms of it, or your dominant view of happiness in terms of it.